Death Battle Season 9 had a lot of new series in it, which is awesome, and I would love for this to become a thing that future seasons keep doing. With nearly 20 new series that haven't been on the show before, today we're going to keep coming up with new matchups for each new series that has shown up this season, and avoiding making people fight returning combatants from the show. That's really the only rule, so let's get to it. For League of Legends, there were a ton of options, but only one I could remember where I gave any shits about the opponent: Victor versus Dr. Octopus from Marvel Comics. I don't know if it's Victor or Victor. I decided whatever I said would be how I'm going to say it. So I just went with Victor. So I'm going to do that, and I hope it's wrong so I'm annoying some people. I really like Dr. Octopus. He's probably my second favorite Spider-Man villain behind the Groin Goober. I don't really care about League of Legends, or especially Arcane, but this actually does give Doc Ock a matchup that's both thematic and has an actual dynamic. Thematically, the two are scientists who were once good men who attempted to use their inventions to better the lives of humankind, but after an experiment that went wrong, they went bad and lost their minds and became bad guy. Victor really just looks cool design-wise, and with his war suit, I think he bounces off Ock better than others. Considering for a long time Dr. Octopus's matchups include the likes of Mr. Freeze, where it's thematic but lacks a fight dynamic, or General Grievous, where it has a fight dynamic but no real theme, this one finally hitting the midpoint makes me a fan. With any luck, Arcane will make people push for a Victor episode, though I expect people will push for Vi first. Though Doc Ock has a bigger draw than either of them, because everyone loves Molina's portrayal of the character in the films. Good matchup. Demon Slayer is a series that I don't give any fucks about, which actually made it easier to decide the matchup. It has to be Mirio Tagada versus Rengoku. Rengoku? I'm assuming it's Rengoku, but I'm going to call it Rengoku because that sounds much more amusing to me. I don't know for sure, but I believe the theme is mostly revolving around the similarities between them as characters, and from a little I've seen of Rengoku, it does seem like he has a very similar vibe to Mirio. Maybe I should pronounce him Rengoku. Because people get annoyed when people say Goku instead of Goku. Rengoku, that's what I'm calling him now. And from what little I know, there's also a big deal about the two making grand sacrifices against a big villain. To me, as a big fan of Mirio, I would just be happy to see him on Death Battle in any regard, and Rengoku certainly has the most interesting dynamic to me of Mirio's options. Which, it's just Shadowcat from Marvel, which doesn't sound particularly interesting. Mirio's quirk is used in such interesting ways despite his limited screen time, and I would love to see what Death Battle could do with them, and the creativity they could employ. Meanwhile, of all Demon Slayer characters, Rengoku is the one who, from a design perspective, certainly has me the most interested. And what else I suppose choose a Demon Slayer? Huh? The lolly girl in an episode, or Michael Jackson? I'm not going to dwell on Invincible for long. It's Battle Beast vs Lord Boros from One Punch Man. I've talked about this before. I'll link the video where I talk about it in the description so I don't have to repeat myself. Akira doesn't have many options for Death Battle combatants. Really, it's just Tetsuo for the most part. So I'm basically strong-armed into the only above terrible sounding matchup: Shotaro Kaneda vs Mac Rokitansky from Mad Max. To my knowledge, this does not go any further than the two being post-apocalyptic protagonists who drive iconic vehicles, those obviously being Kaneda's bike and Max's Pursuit Special and his many other cars. I guess what captures me about this matchup more than the others is just the general vibe. These two series both have very iconic styles and feels to them that I do think complement each other well. It'd be easy to portray this fight as if it's two parts of a post-apocalyptic world meeting each other for the first time, and with Max's history with bikers, you could argue the scenario kind of writes itself. I can understand if you think Kaneda's laser rifle makes the dynamics seem a bit unfair, but I think the two can just shoot at each other while riding in their vehicles, not hitting each other much until they take out each other's rides and then fighting in melee. You'd probably get around that fine. Mythology. There are a lot of mythology matchups, but my favourite has to be Typhon from Greek mythology versus Surtur from Norse mythology. Greek versus Norse seems to be super common just generally as a discussion, and I do like the big one, Zeus versus Odin, but Typhon versus Surtur is one that I just enjoy the most. The two are the big boys, the big kings of monsters and their myths who are nigh unstoppable. Personally, I would want this to be portrayed as if it was telling a poem of the end times, because most proses are written in poetic form. Have us start with Typhon looking to the sky, expecting the parting clouds during a massive storm to be Zeus descending, but instead a fireball crashes into the ocean and Surtur rises out from it. The sea is vaporized around him just by the fact that he's there. I want a shot that looks like a biblical mural of the two approaching each other, Surtur on one side walking through the ocean as steam eclipses him, boiling the seas, while Typhon awaits him around a raging storm. The fight should portray the great scale of this battle not through destroying mountains or obliterating continents, but from their attacks shaking the constellations in the background. The tapestry of the night sky should be changed forever just from these two fighting, and when it all ends and the winner is remaining, they approach the mainland and we see mankind's fear as they realize nobody is coming to save them. It's dark, but I like it because it fits these two. Predator. Now this is a hard one because there's a lot of matchups I do like. There's Predator Scar versus the Meta, which I want to shout out, that's a good one. And the upgrade Predator versus the Indoraptor, which I actually really like despite their films being dog shit. But the one I'm going to shout out is just a personal favourite of mine, Predator Wolf versus Old One-Eye from Warhammer 40k. I want anyone who's thinking, what? That's such a slaughter, Wolf would get torn to shreds, to stop thinking that, because so far, most matchups in the death battle are like that. So shut up. What I like about this matchup the most is that it gives me that alien versus predator dynamic, in the sense that you still have the Yautja acting as a hunter against another animalistic alien species, that despite all odds is still of nearly comparable intelligence as a killer. While Upgrade versus the Indoraptor has that too, in this case not only do I think Predator Wolf as a character is both better than Upgrade, but also the only good thing in Alien vs Predator the Squeakquel, but I also prefer Old One-Eye to the Indoraptor in basically every way, with the Tyranids being my second favourite army in the entirety of 40k behind the Necrons, and also one of my favourite science fiction races in general alongside the aforementioned Necrons, their Halo counterparts the Flood, the Cybertronians and Transformers of course, and a few others. Why these two specifically? Well, these two have the same thing going on. They're an old, worn-out member of their species that you'd assume is past their prime based on their age and injuries, but managed to be among the most capable and impressive of their race. Predator Wolf, despite his apparent old age, single-handedly took out an entire hive of xenomorphs without needing to self-destruct them all to do it, and even fought against the only known Praetorian Predalien in the franchise. Old One-Eye, meanwhile, despite seemingly not being able to regenerate the wound that gives it his name, was able to sow terror and havoc across the entire realm of Ultimar, and his fate isn't even known to this day. I think the fact that Wolf's most famous battle is against the Praetorian Predalien, a seemingly unstoppable giant monster of immense power that eclipses his own many times over, and that Old One-Eye's most famous battle is against Scout Sergeant Telion, a smaller, more technically advanced foe who One-Eye could have easily been able to kill with a single hit, but was outmaneuvered against until it was hit in his weakest point, makes this dynamic right itself. They are the exact kind of opponent that they are most well known for fighting against, which gives us both a hunter and prey matchup, a technology versus nature matchup, and a David versus Goliath dynamic all at the same time, with an easy to write scenario of just having Wolf deciding to hunt Old One-Eye for any reason. Yeah, I am aware, Old One-Eye would just rip Wolf apart in a debate, but it wouldn't even be the biggest stomp in this very season if it was shoehorned in. I think it would make for a stunning visual if Wolf was able to get that lucky shot and stun One-Eye long enough to activate his self-destruct, but still get caught in it by Old One-Eye who just tanks the destruction. He's completely mangled and fucked up, but One-Eye is alive from the explosion and slowly recovering as the fight ends on that note. Anyway, that's enough talk about a matchup between the best part of the worst movie in this franchise and a character more obscure than Sauron. Warframe gives me little to talk about, but there is one matchup that I will admit hits a certain positive spot for me. Hydroid vs Black Manta from DC. There really is nothing deep to this, ironically enough. At best, it's focused on the fact that they're in underwater armor and fighting that, and I've heard some people call Hydroid a villain, I guess. This matchup kinda stands as what a lot of Dr. Octopus's matchups were to me before Victor. Black Manta is a villain that I like a lot. He's like the lesser version of Eobard Thawne, a villain who is the evil reflection of his heroic counterpart, but also just the pettiest, most evil cunt in the world. Black Manta has done shit that would get a thumbs up from old Eobard, and so far Hydroid is the only opponent I know of for him who actually matches him aesthetically and allows for an underwater battle in this way. Of course, it does have one major problem, the fact that it's a matchup for Black Manta where he can't banter with his opponent, and that doesn't really work for me, but it is the best he has for now, and the closest thing to a Warframe matchup that can get any attention out of me at all. 007, this one was easy. Obviously it had to be Jaws versus Jaws. I mean, that's such a classic rivalry. How could it be anything else? They're both movie villains who bite things with their jaws, namely the super strong teeth within those jaws. Okay, moving on. John Wick. Now this is more of a philosophical one. But what about the pencil from John Wick versus the sword from Kill Bill? Tell me, which is mightier, the pencil or the sword? We all know the pen is mightier than the sword, which of course is more of an expression about how talking something out is always superior to throwing hands. But in death battle, nobody cares. But is the pencil, pen's inferior little brother, a match for the sword too? There's only one way to find out, isn't there? Xeno Dragon Ball. This one was tricky, and it's not really a new franchise, but it is a new section of the franchise, so I'm including it. Any matchup with Xenoverse I have any interest in are the ones with characters we've already gotten, namely fully composited Gogeta versus fully composited Omnimon, and Xenotrunks versus Vector Prime. Beyond that, there's not much here, but of course there is Universe 6 Hercule Satan versus Marvel vs. Capcom Dan Hibiki, because if you're gonna go full stupid, why not do it fully? SpongeBob SquarePants. I spun the wheel as someone who doesn't care and landed on Squidward vs. Benson. Fuck it, there you go. Super Friends. Man, these last two really give me a little to say. Well, how about Super Friends Superman vs. Superhero Squad Show Thor? Ah, shit, I already made the Super Friends vs. Super Squad show joke. Fuck. Friday the 13th? Halloween? Well, I'm just gonna knock these out together because we have Roy Burns vs. Corey Cunningham, and of course, Laurie Strode vs. Tommy Jarvis. I'm too lazy to make thumbnails for either of them, but go watch the predictions for Jason vs. Michael because we mentioned them there. Now I gotta talk about matchups again, starting with Middle-earth and Aragorn vs. Jon Snow. There are a lot of matchups for characters from Middle-earth, but to me the one I'm most interested in is this one. Two men rightfully born as kings who lost their fathers at a young age and became more well known for their endeavours in the north, along with a bunch of smaller connections that aren't as important. What I like about this match is how it writes itself and how the fight dynamic is. Naturally, to me, I think it's blatantly obvious that for this battle, you would write it as if you had King Aragorn of Gondor meeting with Jon Snow during his time as King of the North. Aragorn would approach Jon asking him for his troops for a conflict greater than either of them, which would imply to be something related to Mordor. Jon would deny and say he has greater things to deal with too, which you imply to be the Night King. Naturally, you could have Jon Snow bring up Aragorn's past as someone who commands armies of the dead to justify him not trusting Aragorn, while Aragorn can bring up Jon Snow's past as someone who has come back from the dead himself to counter. You'd imply that the two know of each other by reputation to add some spice to the setting. As their perpetual stubbornness and light-hearted passive-aggressive snark gets on each other's mutual nerves, it naturally escalates into a fight when they realize that neither will back down and they just decide to settle things with their blades instead of words. The fight would obviously be extremely grounded, focusing primarily on swordplay and improvisation. Not only who can do better with their blades, but what can they do if they're disarmed by each other. Have them tumble down steep landscapes and have the battle take place in a cold arena within the Night Watch, and focus on them having to outwit the other and tough out the blows until the winner, which is probably Aragorn just due to the fact that he has Anduril and Jon Snow doesn't, takes off the other's head or bisects him or guts him in one way or the other. And then the winner goes on to take command of the loser's forces to aid in whatever they were planning. It feels so easy to make this fight work not only as a fight but as a story, even within Death Battle's 3.5 minute long fight animations, because you don't need to put that much time into this, as a lot of it can be done with implication and clever writing. Add to this that I love Aragorn and Jon Snow as well as the series they come from. Insert stock Game of Thrones last season and Hobbit movie 3 are bad opinions here to appeal to people who want to hear objective truths, and bada bing bada boom, I like it. Moving on to Warcraft, there's plenty here, but I have to just stick with the classic Alduin vs Deathwing. Look, I know they both have others too, but frankly this is the one for me. The only problem, and I do mean the only problem I can see, is the size gap. At least, I could see it if Alduin couldn't change sizes in lore, meaning the issue is only an issue if you decide it is. And even then, I'd honestly prefer having the size gap for a portion of the fight, with small Alduin deciding to fight this giant dragon just as he is, and only growing to match him in size when he has to. That just sounds cool. A lot of the ideas for Surtur vs Typhon treating this as some grand biblical battle that songs are sung of millennia after in reverence and millennia prior in prophecy apply to this as well with the scope of these characters. This is a fucking dragon fight, it should be treated as a big deal. Oh, and if you haven't figured out the theme, it's a legacy fight for one thing, and yeah, they're big uber-destructive dragons from high fantasy series. The big thing this has is that it's a long-requested fight with really no problems to me. I guess there's a similar issue to Last Dragonborn vs Chosen Undead, where there's so much stuff to talk about that I don't know if Death Battle could reasonably cover it all within 20 minutes. But they did with Arthas vs Sauron, so I'm sure they'd manage here too. I like this matchup, and Deathwing vs Ghidorah is sleep-inducing as fuck. And finally, our last new franchise for this season, Black Clover. I did not know what to put here. I know nothing of Black Clover, and at least other series I know nothing of this video, either in matchups I knew of that I liked due to the other series, or had jokes I could make easily. So I asked a friend, Huntsman, he animates and he's cool, and he gave me Yuno vs Wendy. Unfortunately, I like Wendy Marvel vs Eleonora Veltaria on account of having actually seen and mostly read Lord Marksman and Vanadis, and that series has the most over-the-top epic OP in anime history, so I have to support it. He also gave me Noelle vs Juvia, which I'm going with because unlike Wendy, Juvia's alternative is Katara, and that sounds as fun as snorting cigarette ash. They fucking use water magic and have a love interest. Honestly, thematically, from what I know, it's about the same as Katara vs Juvia, but Black Clover and Fairy Tail sounds like a much cooler dynamic visually and aesthetically than Fairy Tail and Atla. So I'm choosing this one over it. Fuck you, that'll do, because I actually have nothing to say except that I think Juvia is an overrated character whose only joke is that she's a simp, and even then, she is inferior in every way to Leone when it comes to that joke, or even Edelus Grey. I don't care if you disagree, because I know most of you who are Fairy Tail fans do, so fucking have at you. Juvia is a mid character. But she does have her moments. I won't deny that the fight against Meredy was sick. And that concludes that video. This was way more interesting to make than the other one, which should not be a shock, because it's a way more interesting topic of the discussion. Go ahead and share what your favorite matchups for these new franchises would be if they were to come back. You guys aren't beholden to my rules, so feel free to go crazy. I'd love to hear it. Oh god. Especially if a series don't really have anything I'm crazy for, like Black Clover and Warframe. You are not convincing me otherwise on Wolf vs Old One-Eye though, because that matchup is based, and I don't care if you don't like that it's a stomp.